Today we will deal with interview skills and the interview skills especially with the employer. Although we will touch upon other aspects of interview skills also or interview also, right, which are done in research. When people conduct some sort of a research, then also people use this tool. Let's start from the beginning. So when we define interview can be viewed as a sort of a conversation. Okay, so conversation which usually is held face to face, which means that people who have this conversation, they sit across each other face to face. But this is a special kind of a conversation, and the format of this conversation is questions and answers. And the dynamic of this conversation is usually this, that the interviewer is considered to be the judge in this conversation. Earlier in communication skill, we were making a point that we should not think about that there is a judge who will judge how we speak. But in the interview, which is also part of communication, in the interview, what you see is that there will be a judge. And the type of conversation that we have is based in a format of questions and answers. So the dynamic between these two participants in the conversation, which we are calling interview, is such that one will be the judge and that one is the interviewer, and another one will be judged, and that one is the interviewee, the or the candidate, the one who has come for the interview and the one who is seeking a job. So that's the kind of a dynamic that you will see when we talk about interview as a conversation. So this kind of a communication or conversation is quite different from the other conversations. This happens, as already said, between two parties. One is interviewer, another one is interviewee or the candidate. And as already said, it is also part of communication. But even though it is part of communication, the dynamic or the relationship between these two parties is very different from the other sort of conversations or communication that we have. Usually, remember the dynamic in communication skill lectures, we spoke about that communication means when there is equal exchange of messages or things. It's not that one speaks and another one only listens. But in this, the dynamic changes. There will be judge who is the interviewer, and there will be judged who will be interviewee or the candidate. What are the types of interviews in research? So let's first just touch upon research. Perhaps this is not useful at the moment for you, but since we are attempting what interviews are, we will just touch upon interviews which are held in research also. You might join a company in which you will have to do a little bit of research also, which might involve some interviews. So first type of interview in research is called structured interview. The moment we say it is a structured interview, it means somebody has already created a structure of the interview. So a structure is already created. So it is a structured interview. That is, already everything is properly planned. For instance, the questions. That is, the questions have been pre-planned. There are a set of questions that the interviewer, the one who is doing a research, will be asking interviewees, who could be people in general or the target audience on which the research is conducted. So they will be answering the preset questions. That is, questions which have been pre-planned by the interviewer or the researcher. So these questions have been pre-planned or prepared in advance. And such kind of structured interview is used in something called quantitative research. Quantitative research means that in which information is collected, some data is generated, data is collected. Okay, so that kind of a research. And the type of questions that we have in structured interview, they are closed-ended questions. That is, already there are given options out of which one needs to choose. That is, already some sort of an answer is there at the back of the mind of the interviewer, the one who is doing the research. Because they are closed-ended, that's why the interviewee the ordinary person who is being interviewed. So that person needs to make a choice in giving the answers. And such structured interviews are used for validation of some sort of research. That is, already some sort of research is done, and then you are trying to validate it by generating or collecting data. Second form of interview in research is unstructured interview, which means questions are not prepared in advance. The interviewer will just go and meet the people, and the person will just start asking questions depending on the scenario, scene, or depending on the participant. All these questions will be spontaneous. Okay, this kind of a interview format is used in mostly qualitative research. Okay, qualitative research also people do collect data. So over there also data is collected, and this type of interview will be used as a tool to collect information. This as well as the structured one also. Questions are open-ended. That is, there are not already arrived answers there. A candidate or the interviewee can answer in various ways. Okay, not in one way, not out of the given choices, etc. And such unstructured type of interviews are used for getting the information about the candidate. Now, third type is group interview. Group interview actually is not just part of research, but group interview is also part of job interviews. Okay, so what happens in group interviews is so many people will be collected together and will be interviewed together. Okay, and in this interview, the interviewer will make them interact with each other. So the type of interview that group interview is, in this, the interviewer will make the group interact with each other. So this kind of interview is used for generation of qualitative data. And similarly to unstructured interview, questions are also open-ended, and such kind of interviews are also held because these might not make the interviewee nervous. Okay, might create confidence in the group, especially for the purpose of making them talk. And they are less reliable because they use open-ended questions. Now let us come to our topic, which is the type of interviews which are used in employment for the purpose of employing employees. Okay, so first is a personal interview. So personal interview, which means this interview will be held for selecting employees. It is also held for promoting employees. In many Western countries, such personal interviews are also held for retirement and resignation of employees. Second type is called evaluation interview. As the name suggests, through this interview, employees are evaluated. Evaluated about what? In order to review how much they are contributing to the organization, whether they are still progressing or not, because the organization's progress will depend on how much the employees progress, how much the employees contribute to the organization. Okay, so that's why evaluation interviews will include some sort of a review of employees, and such interviews are held annually, and they're also held in order to find out the weaknesses and strengths of the employees. In other words, that is, an overall view of the employee is known through such evaluation interviews. Let's come to the third type of interview. Third type of interview is called counseling interview. So in order to see whether or not employees of an organization are having problems, organizations hold something called counseling interview. Counseling interviews are those interviews in which they try to find out problems of the employees. Okay, they try to find out what are the reasons, if any, of employees unproductivity, because over time people become complacent. This harms sometimes the productivity of employees. So if there is some sort of breach of code of conduct, or if some employee breaks some rule or regulation of the organization, in that scenario, disciplinary interview is held. Stress interview is held to find out reaction of employees in a stressful situation. Stress interview means that a situation is created which might not be a real situation, but some sort of a created situation in which employees are tested how they deal in a stressful situation, in a situation full of stress. So these were types of interviews, especially in employment. job related interviews. Okay, personal interview especially for getting a job, evaluation interview to check the progress, counseling interview to see whether employees are productive or unproductive, disciplinary interviews to check or to investigate some sort of breach of conduct or some sort of breach of rules and regulation of the organization, and stress interview to check how the employees deal in a situation which is not conducive to them. Then another interview is public interview. So public interview is very common interview which we all know. For instance, interview of a famous person, and the interviewer could be a journalist. Interview could be on several media platforms. And then comes informal or conversational interview. Actually, informal or conversational interview, this kind of clear cut demarcation is nowadays blurring, because these days in interview you have to be formal, but many times people do start with small talk. In the informal or conversational interview, what happens is that questions, just like unstructured interview, questions are not preset, and they are adapted to candidates' nature and priority, and the interviewer, that is uh, the employee, the person from the organization, that also goes with the flow. Now, these were the type of interviews, but what to do, how to appear in these interviews, okay, how to prepare for these interviews, this is the question that is most important, especially for students like you. So what you do is, first step to prepare for interview is some sort of a self-assessment. So what do you assess? You assess your strength, especially you assess your strength. Okay, so for preparing for interview, when you are doing self assessment, in that you need to know what is your strength. You need to explore what is it that you are best at, in which area are you best. Okay, so you need to try to explore that, what is the area in which you are best. So if you are best at some area, if you have some sort of best quality, then you corroborate it when the interview is going on. When the interviewer asks you what are your strengths and weaknesses, so you corroborate, you talk about that strength of yours which you have already discovered or explored and prepared how you will talk about it. So you corroborate it with examples, maybe in the form of an interesting story or something like that. In self assessment, academic performance is also included. So what you do is, you try to know what are your grades, but that's not the way to talk about the I got 10-point CGPA in 10th or something like that. No, you need to make a point about it. You need to discuss the courses that you had opted while you were studying and how they were related, or they were somehow a stepping stone to the career or position that you would be looking for in future, for which you have come to give this interview. So in this way, you will have to talk about your academic performance. Then the work experience. So while you're preparing for a job interview, then you need to also prepare or think about your work experience. You need to be able to express what were the things that you learned in your previous job. You also need to relate all those lessons, that is whatever you had learned, how you are going to relate to the present position that you are seeking now. That is, first, whatever you learned from the previous job, okay, and then how those learning experiences, because experience means that you have learned something, so how you are going to apply that learning of the previous job in the prospective job for which you have come here to appear for an interview. And then professional goals. While preparing for the interview, you need to also talk about what were your main or major course, right? And you also need to prepare it in such a way that at the time of interview you are able to match your major courses. For instance, you are able to match these main courses with the type of career or professional goal that you have chosen for yourself, for which you came here for interview. You also try to prepare on the goals that motivate you to good work for them. That is, the goals, for achievement of those goals, for achieving those goals, you do the good work. Okay, so in this way you need to discuss your professional goals. And then we come to the things that you need to do before the interview. This is very important. So what are those things? For instance, research on the employer. Even before you approach an employer, okay, or even before you go for an interview, you need to do research, because you, while you were getting education, you earned a set of skills or qualifications, and in accordance with those qualifications and your skills or your passions, you would like to look for a job. So if this is what you have already set for yourself, then you need to look for an organization in which you will fit perfectly well. So because of that, you need to think about the employer, the type of employer. You need to do some sort of research on the employer even before you get a call for an interview, because you will apply to only that organization which you think will be fit and will be matching the type of qualifications, skills and passion that you have. It's not that just there is a vacancy and you will go for that. So what are the areas that you need to look for in doing some sort of a research on employer? First is reading their website. All organizations have their websites, so you try to read their websites. Suppose you want to join Tatas, then you need to search about Tatas. You need to read about their history. You need to, search how it all began. Okay, who is heading Tatas now? Okay, so you need to do all this kind of a research before even going for an interview, or even before sometimes applying. Okay, so you do this kind of research by reading the information available on their website. All websites of all organizations, most of the organizations, do tell about themselves, their history. And not just that you need to read about the organization on their website, but also read about their products. What is it that they manufacture? What is their business all about? Okay, what this organization does. So you need to read about that also. You need to read about their services. You also need to read and understand the organization's mission statement. That is very important. And you need to understand it. Okay. And you need to see how much that mission statement fits well with what you are looking for. Okay, and the most important thing is you also need to read about their annual report. All organizations release their annual reports, so that annual report will give you lot of information about the organization. You also need to do some sort of not only do research on the organization, but also do research on the type of position that you want to apply to. For instance, if you applied already, okay, or if you want to apply, then you also analyze the job description. All advertisements for job will carry a job description, right? So you analyze that job description and see if you fit well. Okay, see, this is what you're looking for. Is this what they are looking for? Can you offer them this? Then you need to also match your experience to the job. Next is you need to also know the CV or resume. It is resume, not resume. Resume is a verb which means to start again, but resume is different. It is pronounced as resume. So you also need to know the resume, because many times such situations might come that they might ask you straight away out of your resume or CV. And you also need to prepare examples of your accomplishments. That is, you must be able to tell them in an interesting or very captivating way about your accomplishments. Another important aspect or things that you need to do is before the interview, that is knowing the interviewees and the format of the interview. There could be various format of the interview as already discussed. You need to know in advance who are the people who will take your interviews. You can do this when you are on the spot, okay, at the designated place where the interview will be taken. Okay, so you try to ask about who are the people who are going to interview me, and also what type of interview is going to be held. So this is what you need to do. You also need to know in advance how this interview will be held. Okay, that is the format of the interview. Now next comes practice. Okay, even before going to the interview, okay, you need to practice your answers. That is, you need to prepare certain questions on the side of the interviewers, okay, people who will interview, okay, and then you need to prepare those answers also. All this is hypothetical in the sense that you need to have certain idea about what kind of questions can be asked, because you are already doing the research. You create those hypothetical questions and you also then practice your answers, whatever answers that you have prepared. And it is also told that you need to practice the usually asked questions. Okay, so the first question in interviews will be asked is, tell me or tell us about yourself. Okay, so that appears to be very simple question. When you will watch these videos, then you will understand how difficult this question is to answer. So you need to practice those questions which are usually asked. Okay, and for practicing, obviously you can take the help of other people. Then you prepare a list of questions. Okay, because even the interviewers will give you some sort of a chance to ask them questions. Okay, so what are the type of questions that you should ask? Questions which will demonstrate your interest. You can ask about organization. You can ask about the type of working culture that the organization has. You can ask about questions about the pay structure if interviewer starts it. Okay, then another most important element in interviews is, while you are preparing for the interview, before a thing to do before interview is location of the venue of the interview. So you need to also familiarize yourself with the location, okay, where the interview will be held. Okay, you can use map, you can use GPS, etc. Okay, and in our time it's very easy to locate things because we have GPS and maps, right? Google Maps and other things. Okay, and you also need to see parking facilities in case you are taking your own vehicle. You also need to see the availability of public transport. So these details are very small and they also appear very insignificant, but they are actually very important. Now, what to do on the day of the interview? This is also very important, obviously, right? First is the external appearance, how you should appear on the day of the interview, right? So obviously you should be well groomed. Okay, you should dress up properly and appropriately, and you should look professional. You don't need to go ever to appear for an interview in a casual dress. Okay, so you need to look professional. And second aspect is supplies. You should have pen, notepad, etc., or some sort of a device on which you can note down things. Keep your CV. If original documents have been asked, then take the original documents as well as copies in a file. Okay, keep sufficient amount of water, keep money including some change, and also have information about public transport, and also keep small tiffin in which you can keep your snack. That is also very important because usually in interviews you have to wait a lot. Okay, so for energy you need something to eat also. What you do is you arrive 20 to 30 minutes early at the venue of the interview. Okay, and try to calm, relax, and never think about the result, what will happen in the interview. Okay, because if you will think about the result, then obviously it will create stress in your mind. Okay, so in order to escape the stress level, in order to escape stress, you need to not think about the result, just be relaxed. Now let's now come to the interview with the employer. So what you do when you enter the interview room, first step is the greetings. Okay, you do the handshake and be sure that the handshake is firm. Okay, which shows that yes, you've come. Okay, eye contact is very important. And smile. Okay, smile. With smile you also need to show some sort of politeness. Okay, then second aspect is non-verbal communication or body language. This body language we have learned is very important in communication. In the communication skill lectures, we learned about body language also. So body language. So what you need to do is you stop fidgeting with the hands. That is, don't just play around with your hands because it will show nervousness. It will show that you are not sure of yourself. Don't drum your fingers. Don't click the pen. Do not tap your shoes. Okay, because all these are indications of your impatience, and they also create an appearance about you that you are not interested in what is going on. That is, you are not interested in the interview for whatever reasons. And posturing is also very important. Don't slouch. That is, don't just sit relaxed. Your back should be straight. Okay, so don't slouch in the chair. Posture, if you will slouch, then it will create an unrefined look, and also make you look that you are tired or inattentive. You're not paying attention to what is going on. Next is, you don't need to sit arms crossed. Okay, so don't cross your arms. What it indicates is that you are defensive. These are the body language aspects. We may not know that these are the meanings of the type of body postures that convey. Okay, but this is what people understand by it. Okay, if you sit arms crossed, then it shows defensiveness. It also shows that you are not a flexible person. And chewing, never chew anything at the time of the interview, before or even at the time, because it will be a rude gesture. And also avoid blank expression on face, because it will create some sort of a doubt that you are not able to understand the interviewer. Avoid looking at ceiling or floor when you don't have answer. Generally people look at ceiling or floor, or sometimes sideways, so don't do that, because it will be a sign of insincerity and it might convey that you are not prepared well. And next is, if you have long hair, obviously you need to cut the hair, but in case you've gone with the long hair, then don't flip your hair off the face, don't put them back in front of the interviewers. Okay, because it might make you look that you're out of control or nervous. You also need to maintain positive attitude, and in the interview no need to make excuses, no need to blame others for anything. You need to be very honest about your weaknesses and your past failures if you have had. You need to also make a point about those failures. Just saying that, yeah, this is something where I was unable to perform that task, but you need to make a point about it, whatever you have learned from it. You also need to convey clearly the steps or the things that you are trying to do or attempting to do to improve yourself with respect to your past failures. Then focus, because the entire interview is dependent on what you will speak. Okay, obviously it is also dependent on how you look, how you sit, but final evaluation will be on the basis of what you say. So your answer should be well organized, loud and clear and well organized. Loud does not mean shout. Loud means that you are properly audible, and they should be well organized also. Don't give irrelevant information. Information which is relevant to the job, relevant at the time of, or relevant with reference to the question that the interviewer has asked. So only provide that information. And you also not forget that your job here in the interview is to show how you fit the job. And anything that they ask, you need to answer with examples. You need to avoid yes and no responses. Okay, try to create picture by your words. Okay, try to give examples of your personal qualities and try to give examples of your abilities. Don't just say I'm a team leader. Just this sentence, I'm a team leader, is a useless sentence. It does not show anything about you, about yourself. If some team leading thing you have done, mention that rather than saying I'm a team leader. And then you can even ask questions to the interviewer. If the interviewer tells you, is there anything you want to ask us, then you can ask the relevant questions, obviously, right? Avoid asking meaningless questions. Okay, ask about the job responsibilities, ask about whether there will be a training period, ask about the career advancement opportunities, ask about whether the job involves travel, ask about what is the next step that you need to take after the interview is over. Now let us see the stages of interview. There are stages of interview also. For instance, introduction. So in the introduction, greetings are included, exchange of names, small talk also comes. Small talk is very, very important. Some casual questions are also involved, right? And the some topics that make you at ease, because interviewer will do these things. Small talk, interviewer will try to initiate some sort of a talk. Okay, try to initiate, try to make you at ease, because interviewer knows that you must be stressed out. So the interview might ask you about or talk to you about weather, traffic, hobbies. Okay, so these things can be asked. So what are the common questions? The common questions are about yourself, about education, about previous job experience, about interests and goals, about organization, about job position. And the example of these common questions are: tell us about yourself. Why did you choose the subject you did your graduation in? what are your interests, right? There could be questions about the position that you want to take up. Okay, so in these questions, the focus will be to evaluate you how you fit the job. Okay, so what interview will do is interview will seek your work ethic, your values, and there will be other times in which interviewer will try to discuss and showcase your experience, qualification, accomplishment, right? So some questions or opportunities will be like this. And what are the sample questions? Why do you want to join our organization? Why are you interested in this position? What contribution will you make to the organization if selected? How do your experience and education qualifications equip you to get this job, right? So all these come under questions about position. Now let's reach the conclusion of the interview. So in the conclusion, the interviewer will try to summarize everything what has happened in the interview. Okay, might also clarify if you had asked some questions. Okay, so what you need to do at this moment is you need to repeat your interest in the organization towards the end of the interview. You need to also repeat that you are or how you are suitable for this job. And what interviewer will do, interviewer might also mention what you need to do after the interview, might also mention when you will be contacted. If interview does not mention the next steps, then you must ask yourself, you must ask the interviewer. Then one more sort of interview in which the behavior aspect is tried to know, right? So it's called behavioral interviewing. So it is a technique in which candidate performance in a future scenario is predicted. In order to check the suitability of the candidate, they create a situation in which you get to know about how that candidate will react in the future. Okay. So in this, candidate's past is focused. Why past is important? Because a person's past behavior might be used to see how that person will behave in future. So through the behavioral interviewing, employers get some sort of an objective information about the candidate, about the prospective employee. So what are the example of questions in behavioral interviewing? So how do you work with people from diverse cultures? This is a very, very important question. Tell us about when you work with people from diverse cultures. Okay, so such kind of questions can be asked. So how you need to tackle the behavioral questions? Your answer should be specific, not too long, not too short, to the point, right? It could be detailed also, but you need to be careful while you are giving the details, whether the details are very private, whether the details are irrelevant. So you need to avoid those things. You cannot give the strangers very private details about yourself. Then careful listening, that is also important. And ask for clarification or rephrasing the question if you did not understand, because many times you don't understand, then you request them, could you please rephrase your question? And you can also make a point through some sort of stories or anecdotes. And in this, you also need to structure your answers. So you can describe the situation, you can give some sort of detail in which the type of action that you took. You can also state the result or what you learned from that situation. For preparation of behavioral questions, what you need to do is that you need to keep in mind your achievements from school or work. Okay. You also keep in mind the type of challenges that you had faced. You also tell about your past experience, again, not too private. For instance, internship, classes and projects, participation in sports, you can talk about those things. Community service, you can talk about part-time, full-time jobs, you can talk about decision making, organizational skill, problem solving, and team building skills through the examples. Now the sample questions, these are very important. For instance, how are you today? Tell us about yourself. What do you know about our organization? How did you decide what to study? Why did you choose this particular educational institution? Why do you think that you will do good in this job? What is your work ethic? Describe challenge you may have faced in previous job or internship and how you tackled it. Tell us about a mistake you made. How did you fix it? Tell us about how you dealt with a difficult person. Tell us about if you ever learned something new in short time. How did you learn it? Describe how you will work in teams. Tell us about if you ever got criticized about your actions. How did you deal with criticism? What are your goals and how do you plan to achieve them? Describe the situation in which you had to multitask. How did you multitask in that situation? Tell us about a project in which there were disagreements between you and others. What did you do in that situation? Tell us about your ability to work under pressure. Tell us about a suggestion you made to others and what was the result of this suggestion. What are your two accomplishments you are proud of? What are the duties you liked or disliked most in previous job? What is your strongest point according to your previous supervisor? What sort of management style do you work best under and why? Why do you want to leave your current job? What motivates you to do your best on the job? Do you have any questions for us? So this is what interview skills or the type of questions that are asked in an interview is.